So let's look at the book of Judges. As we have written in your notes, number one, the time of Judges. The book of Judges covers the period from the death of Joshua, which really is recorded in chapter 2 of Judges, but all the way till the coming of Saul to the throne, and that really gets into the 1 Samuel, but it's covering that length, and it's a span about 350 years. So it's quite a long time that it's going through that. The ideology, number two, the ideology of the people. There are two verses that give us kind of their mindset, their thoughts. And the first one is Judges chapter 17 and verse 6. And it says, "And in those days there was no king in Israel. Everyone did what was right in his own eyes." And then Judges chapter 21 verse 25 also says the same thing. In those days there was no king in Israel, and everyone did what was right in their own eyes. And that really is their problem. Not that there was not a king, but they did what was right in their own eyes. The theme of, number three, the theme of Judges, this book is called the Dark Ages of the Hebrew people, because it shows the repetitive cycle of Israel deserting God for heathen gods. And really need to underline those two words, repetitive cycle. Repetitive cycle. It will make sense when we get into number 4. The meaning of sword, S-W-O-R-D. That's an acrostic for the cycle that they were constantly repeating. And you will see that as you read through the book. And so the first one, S, stands for sin idea. Sin idea. They rebelled against God. Sin idea. W, wrath kindled against them. The wrath that is kindled against them. It's for the W. O is oppression from a foreign nation. Oppression from a foreign nation. R is repentance of the people, crying out to God for deliverance. Repentance of the people. And the D is for deliverer is raised up, a unique leader. A deliverer is raised up. And they are called judges. And henceforth, that's where we get the name Judges. If you were to, I probably should, I thought about making the kind of the circle, but then it would be bad. I left the blanks there for you to fill in. If you would draw a circle, sin, and then it would be the wrath of God and oppressive. They would repent, cry out. God would send a deliverer until another generation who did not know that particular judge, and they would start it all back over again. And then once they got the next one, they would forget who the judge was or that leader that delivered them, and they would start it right back over again, over and over. So it's a cyclical nature that they have done over and over. The title and author, number 5, the title Judges is derived from the 12 unique leaders called judges, as we just mentioned. There is no author named in the book. In fact, it doesn't tell us who it is. Ancient Jewish tradition identifies Samuel as the author, since he was the last, really, of the judges before Israel had a king, that being Saul. And most likely he was the one who collected all of this information into this book. Now, he wasn't alive during all of it, but he did collect the information to give that. So a brief outline of the book. Letter A is the partial fulfillment of the conquest. Chapter 1, chapter 2, verse 5. And then letter B, the period of Judges, chapter 2, verse 5 through chapter 16. And then letter C is the promiscuous moments of madness. the promiscuous, Promiscuous. I had to look at it. Promiscuous. And when we get down, when we do a little bit more development of the outline, you'll see why it's that, and it really is madness when we think about it. So let's look a little bit more. The partial fulfillment of the conquest. Letter A is the command. The command. And the command is really twofold: to drive out the foreign people, and the second of all, to tear down their altars. Okay? And that's what he said. That's what I want you to do. The Canaanites and the Perizzites and all the other ites that were out there, totally get rid of them and tear down their altars to false gods. Letter B is the compliance. The compliance. They didn't do it. They did not utterly destroy them. What they did, though, is to make them to pay tribute. Basically, you became servants. You're going to pay us not to come and invade you. Letter C is the consequences. The consequences. Number one is God would not drive them out, those being the foreign people. Number two, that there will be thorns in their sides. And then number three, their gods will be a snare to you. And again, it gets back to that Deuteronomic formula. You follow me, you will be blessed. You don't, and you're experiencing these curses. They did not follow the command of driving them all out. Therefore, there are going to be thorns in the sides and snares for them. Then we get into really the major part of the book, and where we get its name, and that is the period of Judges. And there's naming of the judges, and we're going to kind of describe some of the things a little bit later on of what they did. But there were, first of all, number one, the major judges. And now we're going to use major, and also another word, and we'll tell you in just a few moments. But they're not major because they were the most important. It wasn't because they had the longest activity. They're called major because we have a lot written about who they were fighting and how God chose them and what they did in doing that. And so we listed there. There's Othniel, Ehud, Deborah, and Barak. And we put out there by them the people that were oppressing them and that they were fighting against. So Othniel, there was Mesopotamia. Ehud, there was Moabites. Deborah and Barak, the Canaanites. Gideon, the Midians. Jephthah is the Philistines and the Amorites, and then Samson was against the Philistines. Number two is the minor judges, and that's henceforth the name. And they're not minor in that they were less important, or they didn't do as good, or they weren't as popular. It's just that we don't have as much written about them in the text that gives us a better understanding. In fact, we listed beside them the passage that happens to deal with them. And so you see it's one verse, maybe just a couple, 2 or 3 verses, where the other ones maybe even get a couple of chapters, the major ones. So there's Shamgar, there's Tola, Jair, Ibzan, Elon, and Abdon. And those are the 6 that are called minor prophets. So let's look a little bit deeper. Letter B, description of the major prophets, kind of what was happening. First of all, Othniel. Othniel is the nephew of Caleb. Caleb is the guy that came in with Joshua, the 2 oldest of the nation of Israel. He was from the tribe of Judah. He judges Israel for some 40 years. He is a spiritual leader, and God was with them, and his hand basically prevailed. But he was a popular guy. And again, you may want to write out who he was against. That was in Mesopotamia. Number 2 is Ehud. Ehud is unique because he is a left-handed person. Okay? And that's significant. He was a man who had a double-edged sword strapped to his right leg. He went to the king of Moab, and basically he say how we can put this nicely. The king of Moab needed to relieve himself, and so they went into the chambers, and Ehud said, "Hey, king, I've got a secret I need to tell you." He leans over to tell him, and thinking that he was right-handed, he pulls the two-edged sword out of his left hand, off with his left hand, and stabs the king all the way through. In fact, so deep that basically the butt of the sword was swallowed up with the fat. So yeah, the king was killed in his own bathroom, and you can see that in chapter 3, verse 24. The third one is Deborah and Barak. Deborah and Barak. Deborah is the only female prophet to judge Israel. Barak is the general. Some have taken this and said, see here, we have a woman, and why don't we have women today in leadership role? Read the story. That's all we have to do, just read the text. And the text will tell you that, yes, God spoke to her, but spoke to her to say to get Barak to do what Barak needed to do. And he was unwilling to do that. Therefore, she has to step up. And there's a principle there. Yes, God has called men to lead. And if men don't lead, then God will use a woman if he has to. And it's not a has to kind of situation, but God has ordained how things are going to operate. It's not a question of value or importance, it's a question of roles. And so she defeats the Canaanites. There was a commander, Sisera, who was the leader of Jabin's army, and his wife by Jael, the wife of Heber, a Canaanite, killed him by driving a tent peg through his temple. I mean, hey, there are going to be gruesome stories in here, so it's about, hey, you do bad, God sends an oppression, wrath of God, you sends to deliver, there's going to have to be some killing. Number 4, one we probably know more about, Gideon. Gideon, the least likely of all the children of Israel who would be judged. Remember, he says, I'm the least tribe of the least family, and the least of my father, the least one. But the account depicts the provision of God on behalf of the faithfulness. He defeats the Mennonites. Number 5 is Jephthah. Jephthah represents all those who are down and out. He is the son of a harlot. He is rejected from his family, and he is a catalyst for vagabonds, for others who are on the down and out. Jephthah makes a foolish vow by saying, the first thing that comes out of his tent when he comes back, he will sacrifice to the Lord, not thinking who comes out. And yes, it's a who, it's his daughter. And so he's made a vow. He's got to keep it. She goes off for a year, and after a year comes back, and he has to sacrifice her. No, that wasn't God's plan. Wasn't what God asked. It was his foolish way of making a vow and not thinking through. And then last of all, probably the most famous of all the judges that we know is Samson. And again, look, Samson covers chapters 13 through 16, some 3-4 chapters. And so we kind of broke it down. And notice how it comes down to, first of all, 4 perceptions of Samson's life. Number 1, he's a boy, chapter 13, verse 25. We see him also against the lion, chapter 14, verse 6. Against 30 men, chapter 14, verse 19. And then against 1,000 men, chapter 15, verse 14. Letter B is 3 women. 3 women in Samson's life. His wife, chapter 14, verse 15. There was a harlot, letter number 2, chapter 16, verses 1 through 3. And then most notably that we know, Delilah, chapter 16, verse 4 to 22. Letter C is 2 prayers. Now notice, 4 perceptions, 3 women, 2 prayers, 1 for water. Chapter 15, verse 18, for water. The last one is for revenge. We're taking his eyes. Chapter 16, verse 28. And then last of all, now notice 4 perceptions, 3 women, 2 prayers, and 1 haircut. No, it's not originally with me. I found it somewhere, but I thought, hey, that was pretty cool. So, destruction of that. Some would say, well, his hair grew out. That's what gave him his power. His power came from the Lord. His power came because he was faithful to the Nazirite vow. And the Nazirite vow, 3 things. Could not take of anything that had grapes in it. Grape juice, wine, raisins, whatever it was, if they had those. Second of all, could not cut his hair. And so from birth. Third of all, wasn't able to touch anything that was dead. And really, he'd already violated the wine and drinking the grape juice. He violated touching something dead. The lion with the bee's nest inside, taking the honey out. And then finally, the last one was Delilah cutting his hair. Okay. What the interesting thing is that Samson killed more in his death than he killed in all of his lifetime. So that's the when we say the last of the major judges. Okay, and when you say, well, last of the major ones, the last 2, and we kind of mentioned this again, there is Eli and then there is Samuel. And Samuel really is the last one, but we get into Samuel and 1 Samuel and him and the choosing of the king Saul and things like that. But he is the last one. But the last one that we really kind of are notable that throughout that. And then the third thing is this idea of the promiscuous moments of madness, chapters 7 through 21. And this section is different from the rest of the book. It really gives attention on 2 things, focuses on the 2 incidents, which really illustrates how sinful and how the immorality of Israel, rather than on any kind of a great hero. So it wasn't, hey, this was one thing we'll do. Here, it was just madness when you think about some of the things. And you read through, it kind of makes you wonder just how gruesome and how evil these people really are. The first one, letter A, of the 2 incidents is the accounts of the Philistines. Now the Philistines, they're pressuring the Danites, the tribe of Dan, who are in the south, to go north, the northern part of Israel. Basically, the story is that there's a guy and he wants to set up his own worship. He sets up his own gods. He come across as a Levite, and he says, hey, what are you doing? I'm just kind of trying to make ends meet. He says, why don't you be my priest? You serve my God, little g, and I'll take care of you. I'll provide for you. I'll give you money, take care of all your needs. And he does. Well, when the Danites are moving north because they're being pushed out by the Philistines, because, and again, they didn't destroy them, they come across this guy, and I think his name is Micah, and they see this Levite priest and go, hey, what are you doing here? What are you doing? And so basically they said, no, why don't you leave this guy? Why don't you come and be our priest, and we'll take care of you, and you can kind of go with us. He decides to do that. We don't know whether he decides or whether he's coerced to do that. Basically, Micah finds out, hey, you've stolen my priests, you've stolen my gods, all of my idols. We're going to come and destroy you, and there's a big battle that goes on. And again, there's no win in that situation. First of all, here's a Levite selling his responsibility and service to God, big G, the true God, out to serve little g, an idol. Second of all, how the Danites and how Micah basically was trying to say, if we've got enough money, we can take care of this. And so the battle that goes on, it was a terrible situation. Now we might look at that and say, well, it's not too bad. But remember, idolatry was something that was very, very serious. And remember what God said when we talked about the very beginning. Because you didn't destroy them, they're going to be thorns in your flesh, and they're going to tempt you to serve other gods. And that's what we see happening. So we see this kind of madness. And there is no deliverer. There's nobody we can point to and say, he taught them the right thing. It's just, this is how evil they've gotten. The second event is, it tells of the mishandling of the Levite's concubine. Basically, there's these men that come into a tribe, a city of Benjamin, and they're out there in the square. And this guy has a concubine, and nobody's taking them in, which is, again, according to that part of time, you needed to be hospitable. God told them that when there's a stranger, you're to take them in. No one did. Finally, a guy says, hey, it's getting dark. Why don't you come stay with me? You don't want to be in the square. And the guy says, no, me and my concubine, we'll just stay out here. He says, no, you don't want to do that. Come stay with me. They go into the house, and about that time, the men of Benjamin come out, and they want to say, hey, bring out the guest who came in there. We want to have sex with him. Okay? And he says, hey, don't do that to my guest. And again, to treat a guest badly would be reflective on who you are as being a person of taking them in. He had a virgin daughter, and it said, hey, I have a virgin daughter. You do whatever you want to her. You can understand the meaning of that. And finally, the guy that had the concubine sends her out. Basically, they gang rape her the rest of the night. She, at the day breaks, comes to the door of the man's house. She dies there. The man that's the owner or has the concubine sees her, can't believe her, loads her up. They finally go to his city, and then he chops her up pieces. And she's already dead, but still to chop her up and mailed parts of her. When I say mailed, wasn't in the U.S. Postal Service, but had her mailed to different tribes. Look what the Benjamites have done, and say, hey, come fight with me. We're going to utterly destroy them. And again, why would you even think that? Again, there's no deliverer. There's nothing that goes on. So they do. There's that battle. Almost causes the tribe of Benjamin to become extinct. They almost destroyed all of them. And so that's it. So in closing, at the close of the book, there's no strong personality called by God to unify the people, no judge to lead them also into fellowship with them. The last two judges, as we've already mentioned, are Eli, who is not a very good judge, not a very good leader. And then we do have Samuel, and Samuel does become a very, very good leader. And we'll look at him and his life and things that he did next week as we look at the book of 1 Samuel. Okay?